I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Don Tapscott. Don's one of the world's leading authorities on the impact of technology in business and society. He's the author of 16 books, including Wikinomics, and most recently, with his son Alex, The Blockchain Revolution. Don's a member of the Order of Canada. He's been rated the most influential digital thinker, the second most influential management thinker in the world. He's just wrapped up his second term as Chancellor of the University of Trent University in Ontario. And we had a really interesting, focused conversation on what's needed in terms of innovation and fundraising, the progress that we've made in mental health in Canada. And it's just a really interesting conversation that I wasn't entirely expecting. I mean, Don has been a mental health advocate for 25 years. He was doing mental health advocacy before it was cool. But for some reason, I still wasn't expecting quite such a fulfilling conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Don Tapscott. Thank you for coming in. You know, so much has been said about you, said by you. You're the author of 16 books, last I saw. Member of the Order of Canada, past Chancellor of Trent University, one of the most influential, actually the most influential digital thinker in the world, second most influential management thinker. Who beat you out for that? Who's first? One of the most...
We're number two.
We're number two. Certainly the most influential person that I've ever had on these mics, with all due respect to Rosie O'Donnell. But I'm fascinated by your passion and your work in mental health in particular. That's the whole point of this show. Mm-hmm. So what can you tell me about yourself and about your story that you're most passionate about? How do you define yourself?
Vis-a-vis mental health?
Sure, yeah.
Well, Tony Blair, 20 years ago, organized a campaign against the stigma on mental illness in the UK. And the theme of the campaign was every family. And, I was just sitting in a meeting this week, and one of the other very senior executives at the meeting described the story of how his son was a schizophrenic and had been undiagnosed for many years and finally came into the system as a result of a suicide attempt. And then the other very senior person at the meeting described that his brother was a schizophrenic. And then I described how my brother was a schizophrenic too, Dave. He was a wonderful young man, very talented. He was a concert pianist. He was a championship bridge player, sweet guy, funny guy. But he became ill while he was at university. And he started getting treatment. But back then, this was in the mid-1980s, early 80s, the treatments were not well understood. And it turns out that he was on an okay kind of psychotropic drug, but the dosage was 100 times what they do today. Oh, wow. So he didn't comply, and he had terrible side effects, and it was a brutal thing. And we did our best. You know, he lived with me and my wife, Anna, for some years, and eventually he just kind of gave up, and he took his own life. And so it was at that point I decided, if there's a cause, I'm going to throw myself behind. This is it. And back then it wasn't very popular. In fact, no one would even mention that they had a relative that was mentally ill.
And were you already very well established in the business community by then?
Oh, yeah, I was. I was a well-known person. Actually, during the 80s, I wrote a couple of books that nobody read. I think my mother bought most of the copies. It wasn't until 92 that I had my first bestseller, and that was Paradigm Shift. And then in 94, I wrote The Digital Economy, which they say was the first big book about the web, or the web in business for sure.
Yeah. But even as an influential person, a well-established person, it was still difficult to raise these kinds of issues. Did you ever have any hesitation about speaking openly about these issues?
Well, I did. And the main hesitation was that I thought the stigma might flow over to my kids. So my wife and I were presented with an opportunity to fund a chair in schizophrenia through the University of Toronto and what became CAMH. And we had acquired some resources by then, and we were able to do that financially, and we really wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. But we talked to our kids, and we said, they knew about Dave, and we said to them, look, we'd like to do this, but and we want to be very public about it, but if you think there's any problem at all for you in talking about this, that your friends might think it was weird or something like that, we'd like to know about it. And they were both kind of shocked and even upset at us.
That you might think
that we would ask this question.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So we became quite public about it.
Yeah.
And I got involved, and as did my wife, in what is now CAMH. And it's been a very gratifying thing. That chair was the first. And within a few years, remember Michael Wilson telling me that, and he was the one who talked me into doing this.
Right. Former Minister of Finance, former chair of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, the late Michael Wilson. Yeah.
And also former tragic story, because his son, Cameron, became depressed and killed himself. And Michael was he was much more visible than I was, and he became very vocal around the same time. So he told me that was the beginning. Paul Garfinkel said the same thing, that they got 30 people agreed to fund chairs within a few years after that.
After yours being the first.
Yeah. So we felt good about that. That was an example. Sometimes you stick your neck out, and good things happen. What
was the response that you've noticed from the business community, if any, once you've started speaking more openly about these issues?
Well, there was a group called the Business and Economic Roundtable on Mental Health. And it was created by this extraordinary character named Bill Wilkerson.
Bill the Bull. I've talked to Bill a few times. We haven't had him on the show yet, but yeah.
And he talked me into being the chair of that thing. So Bill and I would travel around talking to the business community, and it was not about mental illness as an ethical issue, it was as a business issue.
Right.
And we did some research on the cost to Canada of mental illness, which turns out is huge.
Yeah.
It's like all other illnesses combined, pretty much. And, just many things that many problems the stigma created. So if you've had a heart attack or something and you're off work for 8 months and then you come back, everybody back then would have open arms. If you had some kind of psychiatric illness, were hospitalized or something, come back and everybody kind of be looking at you funny.
Right.
And the stigma is it's a very odd thing, but I'm very thankful that we're a long way from seeing it disappear, but it's certainly changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, we've certainly come a long way, and I've even just noticed that in the last 10 years that the conversation is very different. Whether or not that awareness is translating into behavior change and actually translating into better services, I'm not yet sure. But these things take time. You're a futurist. You have been identified as. You've been part of this conversation for more than 20 years now. So what have you noticed that has changed since you first started opening up about these things?
Well, there have been significant changes. And again, to flash back, Michael Wilson was the chair of this campaign for what is now CAMH 20 years ago or so. I was his vice chair. And our entire target was $10 million.
Yeah.
And it seemed like 2 years we worked at that, and we barely made it.
Yeah.
People wouldn't meet with us. Banks wouldn't meet with us. They'd say politely, sorry, this is just not an issue.
Right. Well, and at the time, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health was used as a threat to send parents who said their kids were bad would threaten to send them to 999 Queen Street, right?
I know, yeah.
We've come so far.
Yeah, that 999 Queen Street was like it was hell.
Right.
It was the worst thing that could ever happen, the worst place you could go in the world.
Well, we've had, and I think it'll air before yours, but we have the current CEO of CAMH, Catherine Zahn, on the show, and talking about the wall that was built around the facility. It was called the Provincial Lunatic Asylum at the time, a wall built by their own patients to keep themselves in.
Right.
And now to see the facility. So, and
what a happy fluke that facility and 28 acres was way out in the forest 150 years ago.
Right.
And now it's in prime downtown Toronto.
Yeah, and actually quite a thriving neighborhood, too, around the
in part
hospital.
Because of CAMH now, but and a lot of psychiatric institutions are out in the country, and that's not a good place for them to be, honestly.
Yeah.
So the fact that CAMH, the first thing they did was tear down the walls and then run the cross streets through it, and eventually, you heard from Catherine, there'll be Starbucks and retail and general office space, and there already is general residential in there, and it's becoming fully integrated with the community.
Yeah. Now, your brother, was he in and out of hospital?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was in the Clark for a while, and then he ended up in Penetang, not in the forensic unit. He wasn't a violent person at all. But it was very, very difficult, the whole period. And my parents never really recovered from that. My dad, for sure, his life kind of ended, even though he lived another 20 years. It's an impossible thing, to think about losing a child.
Right.
This is just not the way it's supposed to go. But again, flashing forward, CAMH, they've raised well over $300 million now. It's part of a $1 billion campaign to build this extraordinary facility. So that was kind of an elliptical answer to your question. But what has changed? Well, the other really big thing that's actually changed behavior and funding is Bell, Let's Talk. George Cope did a great thing stepping up with that. And it's not some kind of philanthropy alone. It's integrated into the whole business. So yes, there's a philanthropic side, but there's an employee side. And if you're at Bell, that's going to be one of the best companies in the world for you to have a psychiatric problem, because there's a whole process and system there to deal with you. And then on the customer side as well with Bell Let's Talk, that now engages millions of people, and Clara Hughes and other big figures coming out and talking about this.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing other companies recognize the business interest as well. It was a couple of years ago, I think, that Starbucks Canada had announced a $5,000 annual psychology benefit or mental health benefit for their employees, full and part-time. Manulife, I think, came out and announced $10,000. These are huge, to talk about putting your money where your mouth is. It's great to raise awareness, but to actually give people the help that they need seems to be a good business decision.
Sure, absolutely. So, yes, things have changed. I mean, you go to the CAMH campus now, there are names on buildings.
Right.
I can't tell you how unthinkable that was 30 years ago.
To put your name on a psychiatric hospital building.
Back then, I remember Michael and I, this one family, it was a very wealthy Canadian family, and the patriarch died. And in his will, he gave away tens of millions of dollars to charities. The entire family had been racked by mental illness.
Right.
And today they might consider giving their money to do the Brain Center or psychiatric research or CAMH or all the other organizations that are doing stuff. And they gave their money to some other cause. And we were so disheartened by that. And I remember writing, this stigma is so strong, it continues after you're dead.
Right.
That from the grave, you reach out and you tell people, I don't want to talk about this issue or be associated with it.
So for your parents, did they, of course, to lose a child anyway is difficult, but were they forthcoming about the fact that he had died by suicide in particular?
No, not initially.
Yeah.
And they were so devastated, they just couldn't talk about it, really.
Yeah.
The kids, we kind of decided, no, we're going to be open about this.
Yeah.
Has it cost us? I don't care, honestly.
Yeah.
And it probably hasn't, actually.
No.
If anything, people say, wow, you did the right thing. You acted with integrity. Integrity is about doing the right thing. So I'm very proud of that.
It's fascinating to hear you say that it was such a struggle for a $10 million goal when fairly recently another Toronto hospital that isn't even a psychiatric hospital received a $10 million donation from a single donor.
Yeah, just over the transom probably just came in.
Or CAMH itself recently received a $100 million donation. So it seems very popular in some ways now to put your names on the buildings or to donate to mental health causes in particular. Will that have legs? After we reach, if there is such a thing as peak mental health, there are always causes that come and go historically in trends. What's to happen next with after the spotlight moves somewhere else?
Well, it's sure not going to be in my lifetime, and I doubt it'll be in my children's. That tipping point might be reached, because if you look at mental health and mental illness, this is a massive social an economic problem that is still woefully underfunded. It's something like 7% of, this is a figure from a decade ago, but 7% of hospital beds in Canada were people with schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is a low population mental illness. Yeah. So that's a huge cost. Does it get 7% of government research funding in the health area? Does the population donate 7% of all philanthropic gifts towards mental health? Or 7% of Canadians view this as their main thing. So, and that's just the hospital beds. Mental illness as a problem affects a much greater part of the population. Right. And depending, whose numbers you believe, and some people think that, a third of all people are going to come into the system at some point, needing some kind of help or treatment. Yeah. So we have a long way to go. The other thing I'd say is that there have been very exciting developments in treatment, and I'm sure you talked to Catherine Zahn about those. First episode clinics. You catch a young person on their first psychotic episode, and your chances that person's going to live an okay, productive, and almost normal life are hugely higher than if you catch them after they've been at it a couple of years. Yeah. And of course, when they've been sick for a couple of years, chances are they're going to get into some kind of self-medication with drugs and stuff like that. And this intersects with the opioid crisis and all kinds of other things. So that's a really huge thing. And we have the treatments have advanced a lot. But in many ways, we still have a long way to go. Yeah. I mean, I won't say we're nowhere, but many of the drugs that we're currently using today, and again, I'm not an expert, this is what the experts tell me, are just derivatives of the same psychotropic drugs that we had back in the late 50s. Yeah.
In many respects, drug companies have stopped making or researching new psychiatric drugs for the reason that you're saying. Many of them are losing their patents, so they're not as profitable anymore. Right. And I think ketamine has been reinvigorating that in some respects, that companies have been looking into that. But where do you think, as a philanthropist, as an investor, where makes the most sense, the most bang for your buck? Healthcare fundraising as an industry is notoriously inefficient in many ways. Event-based fundraising, not necessarily getting the money to where it can make the most difference. You've been an active investor and philanthropist in this respect, so where do you think is the most bang for your buck in supporting development in mental health?
Well, first of all, we're not one of these people who we're going to give you some money, but we, who have no real expertise or knowledge about the science, are going to tell you how you got to spend it. Right. I don't think that's right. Yeah. And people should give money to an organization like CAMH, and then they should let the experts decide fundamentally how it's going to be used. Now, within that, everybody's got some personal interests. Right. And so we were approached around the idea of supporting the epigenetics lab. So the Tapscott Chair in Schizophrenia is a chair with an epigeneticist. And this holds a lot of potential. That we all know that genes are at the root of a lot of this, most of it, probably. I used to be a big believer in the nurture side of the nature-nurture debate, but now, schizophrenia, it's like this has to do with genetic composition. And then fundamentally, it's not that your mom didn't like you or treated you bad or something like that.
But that's the whole idea of epigenetics too, and that very much seems to be where the science has moved. This idea that there probably is a genetic underpinning, but then your environment plays a big role in that.
And that's the epigenetic layer that's, if you like, around a gene, and this is protein. And so depending on how that protein interacts with the gene, it can affect the outcome. And cause symptoms or illness and so on. But when you're talking about protein, you're talking about chemistry. So there is a potential here that we can just ultimately take a pill and fix the chemistry, and that changes the way the gene plays out and interacts. So we're very happy that our modest donation kind of went into that area. Overall, though, this is not really well known, but I'm a strong, I wrote the book Wikinomics.
Yes, of course.
And that was a big book. Actually, according to Amazon sales, it was the number one management book in the world.
That was a blockbuster, yeah. You're being modest.
Just inched out the black swan. But that book was about collaboration. And I have some very strong views that I will say to everyone. And seeing as we're talking, I'll say them here about changing the whole paradigm in how we do research. Like right now, it's still a very individualist and competitive kind of thing. Where, I'm a granting agency. I'm interested in doing this kind of work. I put it out to an RFP or something to a bunch of bidders, and they all bid on it, and they don't, whatever you do, don't collaborate on the bid. Right. And then one group wins it, and they do the research, and they don't collaborate with anybody else. And then they create the results, and they're all proprietary. And then ultimately the results may get shared by some kind of publication that's a private publication that sells right back to the same university where these people came from. I mean, what's wrong with this model? Basically everything.
Well, and especially if there have been recipients of public funding, which in Canada, chances they have been at various points along the way. Right. Why shouldn't that information be available then freely?
So why is it that there haven't been huge breakthroughs since the 50s? Now, some researchers might dispute that, and that's fair enough, but we don't have a cure, if you like.
We don't.
And we're still dealing with symptoms. We're not dealing with underlying cause. Why is that? Is the brain just too hard to understand? Well, maybe our research model is wrong. In all kinds of industries, we're cooperating together and placing key data in a commons. So you mentioned the pharmaceutical industry. They can no longer continue this existing model where you spend $10 billion on a clinical trial and then you take it to market and you have a patent on it for a few years and then you lose the patent. So it makes sense for the pharmaceutical industry to share clinical trial data in all kinds of areas. Now, unthinkable. Why would they do that? Isn't that our competitive differentiation? Well, no, because experience in other industries shows that you can compete on a different level. Like in the case of pharmaceuticals, you compete on customization or delivery systems or marketing or services or integration or packaging, all kinds of other things. And this has happened in many industries.
Yeah, in the way that Tesla, I think, has made the news about this a lot for installing fueling stations or charging stations and making their technology free to others because that increases the
rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the computer industry back then, in the 70s, every computer company competed on the basis of their proprietary operating platform. Once you bought Digital Equipment Corporation or IBM or Hewlett-Packard or something, you were locked into that platform. We used to call it the hotel proprietary. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave, because the cost of porting your software to some other environment was prohibitive. It was called doing a conversion. You're too young to know that is one of the most hated words in the entire technical world. You never want to have to do a conversion.
Right.
So now they all share a common operating system, Linux, and they compete on a higher level, which turns out is more profitable and which also generates better value for customers. So I would argue, let's rethink our research model. And there's some great researchers at CAMH who have sort of embraced that idea, are arguing that we need to be sharing data, we need to open up research. And to me, that's how you create a really globally competitive research lab. It's not just by having the best people or the best equipment or something like that, but by having the best model that's going to not just maybe come up with some breakthroughs, but it's going to change the whole game.
What can government do from a regulatory and funding perspective to really introduce some life, some innovation into healthcare, specifically mental health care?
Well, if I were king of the world, I'd say, you want to get funding to do research, you're going to have to share your data. And you're going to have to cooperate with others. And that as governments, we get to drive that change in the paradigm.
Right. Now, healthcare in Canada, of course, is a provincial jurisdiction, but the federal government holds the purse strings. Is there a way that financial incentives or mechanisms, strings that could be attached from that perspective in order to sway those kinds of
Well,
decisions.
I think we're beyond my pay grade here. We're talking about how to make this happen.
Right.
But, the main mechanism is we want to see evidence. We want to see your game plan for sharing data and for sharing the research.
Right.
And the people who have the best model of collaboration are the ones that are going to get the funding.
Right.
Or else we'll share the funding.
Yeah, well, so this is it. Then, does a private environment encourage more competition, or is that an urban legend? Is that a myth? If healthcare or parts of this enterprise were privatized in Canada, would that encourage more?
No. You said, would that help with more competition? Competition is the fundamental problem here.
Interesting. Right.
People who have knowledge in a critical area of human endeavor should be sharing that knowledge.
Right.
They shouldn't be competing.
Yeah.
It's almost unethical if you think about it. I'm sure 100 years from now we'll look back on this period and think, how weird was that?
Right.
That they organized research so that one team would not tell the other team what they were working on in order that they could be the team that gets all the money. What a slap in the face to humanity that kind of model was.
Yeah. I think there's this idea that competition drives innovation, but we're seeing that's not working in healthcare.
Well, there's a role for competition, but let's compete on a different level. Like the computer industry competed on a level that delivered better value to its consumers and created a better sort of environment for information technology to change the world.
Yeah. It seems like in the last 10 years or so, there's been more progress from in the technological realm than any other time in history. It seems like the curve has ramped up dramatically. How can we take some of that progress, innovation, profitability, if that's what it takes, whatever, how can we transport that into other areas of society, of development, of healthcare, of understanding the brain better, for example?
Well, oddly, many of these technologies may not be contributing to a more healthy environment for people and their brain development as young people.
Silicon Valley in particular has terrible mental health, according to everybody who's ever been there. Yeah.
Well, also, and this is a very controversial area. I don't know if you know, but it was 1997. I wrote a book called Growing Up Digital. And I did that because I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are prodigies.
Right.
And then I noticed that all their friends were like them. So I started working with 300 kids and I wrote this book. And it was a big book. And it's some of the vernacular that we talk about today, the digital divide, the net generation, and so on. Generation lap, I call it, rather than gap. First time in history when young people are an authority about something really important. And I was an authority on model trains when I was 11.
And they didn't even have to go to the stacks in the library.
The 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on this digital thing that's changing every institution in society.
Yeah.
So, and I was pretty bullish on it. And everyone was saying, oh, kids are net addicted, glued to the screen, they're going to lose their social skills. The internet is eating the neocortex today, of young people today, says Robert Blind, the Sibling Society. Guy wrote a book called The Dumbest Generation. And so I got into a big debate. That particular guy, I can't even remember his name. I probably wiped it out.
So traumatic for you.
I must have debated him 10 times. Yeah. And I've debated lots of people.
Sure.
He was a pretty easy one to defeat.
If he's listening.
Yeah. No, but because, how do we measure dumb?
Right.
IQ.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a standardized measure, but the raw data, it's been going up year over year. And it's never been harder to get into the best universities, and more kids graduate than ever before. Kids don't give a damn, right? Actually, youth volunteering has been rising year over year for 20 years.
Right.
So these kids are a bunch of criminals and bullies. Actually, half of them are bullies. The other half are being bullied.
Right.
Except youth crime has been dropping year over year for 25 years.
Steven Pinker talking about how we actually live in a less violent world than we've ever lived in history.
That's right. So there was a lot of mythology around this whole thing of kids and technology. But if you flash forward today, there are some kind of worrisome things. I know, I don't think I'm telling stories out of school here. My daughter, Nicole, who runs Casper Canada, actually, she was the original NetGener. All of this work, this entire body of knowledge Ended up in millions of dollars of research projects and TV shows and, all kinds of people talking about this. It was started with her. And when I noticed one day she picked up my laptop as a 6-year-old and started trying to figure it out. And it wasn't exactly intuitive at the time. But her children today, she has a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old, they don't use screens, and she doesn't want them near screens for a little while. And she thinks, a young kid, they need to be kissed a lot and talked to and hugged and learn how to throw a ball and hug a puppy and run around and jump up and down and have books read and develop an interest in books. And I think her instincts are probably right about that. And then maybe you keep instilling those kinds of values as they get older, and you won't end up at a restaurant somewhere where all the kids are on their phones and nobody's talking to each other, which I'm sure everybody listening to this has seen that happen.
Sitting next to each other, texting each other, the person right next to you. Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'm still old enough, well, not that old yet, but still old enough to remember a time before the internet, when we had our dial-up on our 386 computer on the floor in my bedroom. So, I have been able to see, I think, that difference and with my own kids as well. It does make me ask the question if it's just a different way of knowing, if it's a different way of being in the world, or is it a toxic one? I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's toxic at all. There are lots of tough issues that come out of this.
Yeah.
The impact of this technology on our brain, everyone's got it on the brain as a big opinion. I don't think that the data is really clear yet. We know that young people are smarter today than they've ever been. They have access to information, but there are all kinds of big issues that flow from that. When I was a kid, we tried to memorize a lot of stuff. Young people today, we don't teach this in our schools, and we should. Every year, kids should have a media literacy class where they learn how to manage this information, develop good BS detectors, think critically, integrate the technology in an effective way into their lives. And we don't really have that kind of stuff. And so young people are kind of left on their own.
Right. So, and when you're seeing people bullied online as well, in particular, believing everything that they read and realizing, or maybe not realizing, I can just turn that off. Yeah. That I don't have to read it.
And is bullying higher today than it was? I don't know. I remember with my little brothers in Niagara Falls, our big challenge many days was to get home without getting in a fight or getting picked on.
Right.
So and that was really tough bullying. So
to go back to your brother in particular for a second, if he were struggling now, would things be different? Would his treatment it be different?
If we caught him on the first episode, his life would be completely different today.
Yeah.
There'd be no stigma in the family at all or with his friends. He'd be on a university where someone would catch that. And universities today, he went to Trent University. And today, I was just up at Trent recently. I'm wrapping up my Chancellorian duties.
Yeah, he would have got to see his brother as Chancellor.
Well, but he also, today, if you're a young person at Trent, you run into some kind of mental health problem, you're going to get picked up. The system's going to pick you up really fast.
Right.
And, people are going to be all over it.
Yeah.
And you're going to be brought into a proper stream where you're going to get the kind of care you need. Yeah. And maybe they're going to catch you on the first episode and you end up in CAMH. That'll make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Now, 20 years ago, you were way ahead of the curve, you and Michael Wilson and a very small handful of others, in terms of getting on the mental health awareness team. Where are we going to be in 20 years? 20 years from now? What's your prognostication on where we're going to be in mental health in 20 years?
Well, I don't know. I'm not really a futurist, actually.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, I think the future is not something to be predicted. It's sort of something to be achieved.
Well, what do you want us to have achieved?
I would like to see a future achieved where the paradigm in research changes so that we move towards a fully collaborative model. And all the great minds and great institutions working on the brain are coming together collectively to solve these big problems. Again, I'm not a psychiatric researcher, but I have little doubt that if that fundamental change occurred over a 20-year period, we'd see some really big breakthroughs. Because we're capable of doing lots of things as a species. We just need to get the model right so that true collective genius can come forward.
Don Tapscott, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure too.
Okay, that's it. That's my conversation with Don Tapscott. Don is the author. His most recent book is Blockchain Revolution: How the Technology Behind Bitcoin and Other Cryptocurrencies is Changing the World. So we didn't get a chance to talk about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or blockchain. I'm not ashamed to admit, as I said to Don off mic, that I have no idea what any of that stuff means. However, I think there's a whole other interesting conversation that we could be having about that. And in particular about how the rapid rate of change, as you would have heard in the interview, has also been impacting mental health. I didn't mention at the top of the show, but you would have heard in the conversation as well that Don and his wife also endowed the Tapscott Chair in Schizophrenia Studies that has been really making some incredible advancements in mental health care in Canada. So I hope to tell you more about that as well, and hopefully we can get some more people on to talk about that. I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you did, or even if you didn't, go subscribe anyway, so that way you can either get more of what you like or give us more chances to find what you like. These conversations have been an incredible education for me, and I hope that they've been helpful for you as well. So head over to Apple Podcast and subscribe, leave us a rating, share the show with your networks, and let us know what you like and what you want to hear more of. You can get to me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Tumblr, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm on everything. At Mark Hennick at most places. That's at MarkHenick. Or you can head over to markhennick.com and find more information about me there. Don't forget to follow all of those accounts, and you can get new episodes every single week, every single Monday, on the diverse range of people that we talk to on this show, just trying to figure out what it means to be so-called normal. I also want to thank all the people that we have helping out on the show here at E1, Adrian and Kimberly, my great editor Dave for putting the shows together. None of this would be possible without any of them, and thank you especially for listening right to the very end of the episode, which I knew that you did. So I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks so much. This has been So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick.